Ok, esta es una presentación. Uh, este año visitar Cueva Cheve. Va al Bozeman a Oaxaca, 6 de febrero, 12 de marzo. Un día en Oaxaca, aquí, y también 4 semanas en Cueva Cheve, y también 4 días en Oaxaca también. En 8 de febrero, uso una colectiva para Cuecatlán, esa ciudad aquí, ciudad pequeña. Es más o menos 2:30 horas, y cuesta es muy rato. Es más o menos 4 en Estados Unidos. Y en Cuecatlán uso un taxi para finalmente camino Oribal para Cueva Cheve. 2 horas es un taxi, no una colectiva. Es muy expensivo. Wait, you guys don't know Spanish. Sorry. So a colectivo is a 15-passenger van, and they shove everybody they can into this thing. So it's really cheap. They leave every hour from both locations. So they go to Oaxaca to Cuecatlán and Cuecatlán to Oaxaca. They drive fast on these roads. They're winding roads, and they stop for roadside drop-offs and pickups. And thankfully, I was warned beforehand of that, and I took Dramamine. Very useful. The nearest village, so you go to Cuecatlán, then up the mountain. The nearest village to Cueva Cheve is Concepcion Popolo. You can see here, I guess I don't need to walk up, I have a laser. Cuecatlán is down here close to the river. So then you drive up the mountain for an hour, you get to this tiny little town up here, and then an hour past that is where the cave is. At Concepcion Popolo, we use that for restocking during the expedition. Any fresh perishables that you would have at base camp. These are not things that were going into the cave itself, but just stuff used at the surface. About an hour from camp. No English spoken here, and I wanted to emphasize that with the beginning of the talk. There was very little English spoken for the 5 weeks that I was in Oaxaca. So my Spanish got a lot better. So what is Cueva Cheve? Cueva Cheve is one cave that's actually a system now, but it's part of a bunch of other caves that have been dye traced to this lower thing over here, Cueva del Mano. And so Cueva Cheve is this big, massive thing over here, goes down, and then on the other side of the mountain, which is you keep going past Concepcion Popolo, you go around the mountain, you get J2, which is also a very famous cave, you get Cueva Charco, which is a famous cave, but none of them have connected to the resurgence spring yet. All of them have been dye traced. Cheve has been dye traced. It's something like over 17 miles between here and here, and it only took like 3 days for the dye to hit the river. So it's a fast, like, little obstruction, but everything tends to sump out, so they haven't found it yet. So one of the goals of this trip was also to push Palomora Cave, which is right near J2. It looks funny there. I'll show it here in the next map. But so we have Cueva Cheve here, all the way down to the sumps. Palomora, basically, so you come out to this road, and you take this other winding road here to this town called San Miguel Santa Flor. The cave is just outside that town. And so as it drops down, it's right near the end of J2. So the hope is it might pass by J2 and get past whatever is the constriction at J2. So we were working kind of this area and this area for the expedition. So again, Cueva Cheve, it is the second deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere. And during our expedition, it has since moved up the list of deepest caves in the world. They found, as you can see, up here, there's a bunch, so there's the main entrance, but the zero datum is this crappy cave entrance that's much higher and harder to get to. Well, we connected to another one that's slightly higher. 32 meters of depth was added to the cave by finding this thing at Camp 1 and following it up until we tied into another cave that was up above and surveyed down. So the cave now is over 1,500 feet. It was 1,480 something. Let's see if I can get that on the screen so I can see it. So it was 1,488. Now it's slightly over 1,500 feet, or 1,500 meters deep. So it's now, like, again, the 10th or 11th deepest in the world. So when I was there, the deepest I got was Camp 2. It was about 850 meters deep. We enter here and go through. It's, as I said, it's a system now because the last 2 years they worked on this area, which is called CL6 or Peña Negra. And so they would go in there and do all this work. And last year they connected it in like 4 places right here. The going lead was right here at the end, and it appeared to be going this way. All of these passages are at a higher paleo elevation, so Cheve is still a very actively forming cave, but Peña Negra is above that. And all of the connections to Cheve are these big drops. So the goal on this expedition was to see what we can do along this edge, to see if there's anything up at the higher level. Whoa, same problem everybody else had. At the higher level, which we might be able to access here, which would get us past the end, which is the problem in all of these caves. My expedition summary, and then the rest of this is just a few photographs with light explanation. I think it's an interesting area, lots of cool things going on. It's a great cave. It was emphasized to me how cold Cheve is. It's 50 degrees. You gotta wear all this warm stuff. My God, did I sweat my ass off in that cave. 50 degrees is hot for a Montana cave, and they had me show up with stuff that was slightly warmer than what I would wear here in Montana. And so I rarely put my suit top on, and I would travel through the cave with sweat dripping off of me wearing just a long sleeve shirt. It's like, okay. So it's hot. They had poor short-term objective planning on this trip. So it was really well organized. They knew where all the leads were. They knew all this stuff, but they got short-changed on staffing. People changed their trip, and so we're a little bit fewer people at the beginning of the expedition. But then also they would just look around at the beginning of the day and say, who's here? All right, let's go do that, and not realize that that meant for long portions of the time I was there, everybody who knew the cave was on one trip altogether, leaving a whole bunch of people who didn't know the cave, who couldn't go rig it because they didn't know where the entrance was or the trail through the cave or the rig points, right? So a lot of these problems added up for me. But my personal secondary goal was Spanish immersion, and I expected that at the time I was in Oaxaca. I didn't expect that on the surface at Camp Cheve. And it turned out we had, in the beginning part of this expedition, a whole bunch of Mexicans there, which was awesome. And there was one point in time where I looked around camp, there were 10 of us, 7 were from Mexico. So oftentimes at camp, the primary language spoken was Spanish. And I learned after my exit from Camp 2, which is 850 meters deep, it's a big amount of work to exit out of a cave that deep. A few days later, I was full Spanish immersion for over 14 hours. I was just as tired from that, sitting on the surface, as I was from exiting the cave from 850 meters deep. So I managed, in the month I was there, I got a round trip, day trip to Camp 1, overnight at Camp 1, 5-day survey at Camp 2, 2 trips to Palomora, which is the one on the other side of the mountain that hopefully bypasses J2, a day of rigging in Peña Negra, resketching the Cheve entrance because they want a detailed map that they can give to the locals for ecotourism or whatever the locals want to use it for, and then multiple days chopping trails to various caves and features. Keep in mind, the base camp of this cave is about 9,200 feet in elevation. So anytime you're moving around, you're at high elevation doing a lot of work, a lot of effort. And it was pretty funny watching the people coming in from sea level and struggling. But it wasn't too bad because, it's not that much different from Montana. So this is what it looked like. So this is an overlook. Somebody hiked up and took a picture of camp. The main cook tent area is over here. These are some personal tarpology projects. and then a big meadow in the middle. So this is now sitting in that common tent area, looking back towards that common meadow and some of the tarpology projects. This one right here was my tent, all the way back on the side. Every morning at 9 a.m. and also at 9 p.m., there were group check-ins. So the morning one would take a while, you know, like half hour-ish, as we talked through the projects that everybody's going to be doing that day. The neat thing about Cheve is they have strung phone wire through the entire cave. And so at 9 a.m. we would also get call-ins from the people underground and make sure we knew what everybody was doing. We could check in, and it made for things to be a lot more efficient. So for instance, when I was at Camp 2 and we were calling into the surface, we could also talk to Camp 1, and we were, sorry, the other camp that was in there, which was Camp Butters at the time, which then became Camp, well, I forget what the last camp is that they just did, but they named them after South Park characters. So anyway, we were able to coordinate this crazy multi-person change and rotation of staffing between underground camps and the surface because we had the phone system, which was great. So this is what Cheve looks like as you're hiking to it from base camp. It's a massive head wall. So the cave itself is like, the main entrance is right here, but a lot of the other stuff you saw, the higher entrances, you go around the back and they're all up in this area. And it's quite the exercise to get there with chopping the trail. But the entrance is a massive entrance. That's only a part of it. And so this is what I spent, you know, several days, all those massive breakdown boulders in there, drawing each one accurately where it is for high quality, potentially, like I was told, a Park Service style map that they can sell to visitors or something like that. So there's a sacrifice altar near the entrance, and it is a true sacrifice altar, as was alluded to by Juan and others. This cave has been known for millennia, and there were human sacrifices literally right here, and most of that stuff's been taken off to Mexico City for main museum stuff. Some of the way through the cave, getting to Camp 1, you have the elephant shaft. There's about 4 or 5 rebelays getting through there. I think it's a little over, I don't know, steep. Also, the thing to know is once you get past Camp 1, you go down further, there's like this multi-20 rebelay pitch. You get down to the bottom of that, you get into some very active water, and we're talking thunderously active water. One of them is called the turbine, for instance. And so there's all these crazy rigging things they do to try to keep you up and out of the water, because apparently to most people, 50-degree water is really cold. But they do lots of reblays. They do things called J-hangs and the slackline tautline, which I'd never experienced before this cave. Before you go into the cave, they require you to do a ropes course, which contains all the trickiest rigging that they would have in the cave. You have to do it in a certain amount of time, and the ropes course they intentionally rig poorly, so it's harder to do than what's in the cave. On the surface, I got to play with J-hangs and tautline slacklines. A tautline slackline is a tight diagonal rope that you clip a cow's tail into, and a slack rope underneath it that you rappel down. So you're rappelling at a diagonal, and then similarly you're ascending at a diagonal, so you can get over waterfalls and other strange features. But it is, again, wet in places, and you know, depending on what you want to do, the original route was not doing all that crazy stuff, and you could walk through the water, and we chose to do that on our way out, and it was really refreshing. I didn't have to put my top on. I was able to cool off because I was finally in the water in this apparently cold Mexican cave. So that's what I have. Any questions about Cueva Cheve, Spanish or English? The temperature of the cave is 50 degrees, 50 Fahrenheit. And again, you start at about 9,200 feet in elevation, and you go down potentially as much as 1,500 meters. So, yes? How much water was I drinking? Not probably as much as I should have been. But yeah, water, again, water wasn't an issue. You did treat it. Everything there we treated with microdyne, which is a silver, colloidal silver mix, and I didn't turn blue, so that's good. But yeah, so you would have to treat all the water. So I would travel with like, I don't know, 1.5 liters or so, and you fill up whenever you need to. But for the most part, it's lots of fast travel, and then you get there and chug a whole bunch of water, and then lots of fast travel. So.
Okay, everyone. If you're going on the off-trail trip, you've already signed up for that. You know your trip leaders. You'll need to meet with them. They know. Hopefully, you've discussed what time and where.